The morphine made everything soft around the edges, everything except the voices bleeding through the bedroom door I'd left cracked open. I should have been asleep. Dr. Patterson had increased my dosage 3 days ago, explaining in that practiced, sympathetic tone that comfort was the priority now. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer doesn't leave much room for hope, only management. Only waiting. I'd made peace with that, or so I thought. Lying in the king-size bed Michael and I had shared for 15 years, my body now a hollow shell of the woman who used to fill it. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I lay there, staring at the shadows dancing across our vaulted ceiling, listening to the house settle into its nighttime rhythms. That's when I heard Michael's voice drift up from the hallway, low, intimate, wrapped in a tone I hadn't heard him use in months. "She's finally asleep," he murmured. "Patterson says it won't be much longer now. Maybe 2 weeks. 3 at most." My heart, already weakened, seemed to stop entirely. I wasn't supposed to hear this. The morphine should have pulled me under by now, should have granted me the mercy of oblivion. Instead, it had only dulled my body while leaving my mind razor-sharp, a cruel trick of pharmaceutical fate. A woman's voice responded, younger, softer, familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. "I hate this, Michael. Waiting like this. It feels wrong. I know, baby. I know." There was a rustle of movement, fabric against fabric. "But we've come this far. Once she's gone, everything is ours. The house, the accounts, the life insurance. We can finally stop hiding." The woman, and now I recognized her, Nurse Sarah, the pretty 28-year-old who'd been coming 3 times a week to check my vitals and adjust my medications, let out a small, pained sound. I wish we didn't have to wait for her to die. What choice do we have?" Michael's voice carried an edge now, something harder beneath the sympathy. "Divorce would mean losing half of everything. This way we get it all. Clean. Simple." My hands, skeletal and trembling, clutched the Egyptian cotton sheets I'd picked out from that boutique in Manhattan during happier times, when Michael and I had laughed about growing old together. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was dying in luxury I'd helped create, while my husband planned his future with my caregiver in the hallway outside. I wanted to scream, to throw open the door and confront them both. But my body, that traitor, wouldn't cooperate. The cancer had stolen so much. My strength, my dignity, my future. I wouldn't let it steal my chance at justice too. Because even as the morphine pulled at the edges of my consciousness, even as my body screamed for rest, one thought crystallized in my mind with perfect, terrible clarity. If they were waiting for me to die, I was going to make damn sure they regretted every second of that wait. The next morning arrived with the cruel brightness that only January can deliver. Harsh sunlight cutting through the gaps in our blackout curtains, illuminating every dust mote, every imperfection. Michael appeared at my bedside at 8 a.m. sharp, right on schedule, carrying a tray with my morning medications and a protein shake I wouldn't be able to stomach. His face arranged itself into concern, the mask he'd perfected over these last 6 months. "Morning, darling," he said, setting the tray on my nightstand with practiced care. "How are you feeling today?" I looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in weeks. Michael Thornton, 42 years old, still devastatingly handsome with his salt and pepper hair and expensive smile. The man I'd met at a charity gala, the man who'd proposed to me on a beach in Santorini, the man who'd held my hand through 2 miscarriages and promised me forever. That man, I realized, had never existed. Or perhaps he had, once, before the money became more important than the marriage. Tired, I managed, my voice the papery whisper it had become. Could you get me my phone? I want to call my sister." Something flickered across his face. Was it annoyance? Fear, before the concerned husband mask snapped back into place. "Of course. But maybe you should rest first. Patricia can wait." "No," I said, with more force than I'd mustered in days. "Now, please." He hesitated, then retrieved my iPhone from the dresser, placing it in my trembling hands with exaggerated gentleness. "Don't tire yourself out, okay? You need your strength." "For what?" I thought bitterly. "For dying on schedule." But I only nodded, waiting until he left the room before I opened my contacts. Not to call Patricia, my sister was in Europe for another week, but to dial a number I'd memorized 2 years ago and never thought I'd need. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Law offices of Janet Morrison. How may I help you? I need to speak with Janet, I whispered. Tell her it's Emma Thornton. Tell her it's urgent. Janet Morrison had handled the estate planning for my late father, a real estate mogul who'd built his fortune from nothing and taught me early that family wasn't always defined by blood. She was ruthless, brilliant, and most importantly, she owed my father's memory enough loyalty to take my call immediately. Emma! Janet's voice came through, sharp with concern. My God, I heard about your diagnosis. I'm so sorry. What can I do? I closed my eyes, gathering what little strength I had left. I need you to come to the house. Today, if possible. And Janet, I paused, making sure no one was in the hallway. I need you to come quietly. Michael can't know. There was a beat of silence, and I could practically hear her mind working through the implications. Janet Morrison didn't build a reputation as Connecticut's most formidable estate attorney by being slow on the uptake. I'll be there at 2 p.m., she said quietly. I'll tell Michael I'm there to review your existing will, make sure everything's in order. Standard procedure for terminal cases. Perfect, I breathed. And Janet, bring paperwork for a complete estate revision. I need to make some changes. How extensive are we talking? I thought about Michael's voice in the hallway, dripping with false sympathy while he plotted my death like a business transaction. I thought about Nurse Sarah's hands on my husband, her youth and vitality, everything I no longer possessed. I thought about the life insurance policies, $3 million worth, that Michael had encouraged me to increase just last year. We're burning it all down, I said softly. Every single thing. Janet's sharp intake of breath told me she understood. I'll bring everything we need. 2 p.m. sharp. After we hung up, I lay back against my pillows, exhausted from the effort of a 5-minute phone call. The cancer was winning the battle for my body, that much was clear. But my mind was clearer than it had been in months, sharpened by betrayal into a weapon I fully intended to wield. I had perhaps 2 weeks left to live. Michael thought he was waiting for a fortune. He had no idea what was actually coming. Janet Morrison arrived at 2:03 p.m., and I watched through the gap in my bedroom door as Michael greeted her in the foyer. His body language was perfect, shoulders slightly slumped, voice modulated to convey grief without being theatrical. Years in corporate sales had made him an expert at reading people, at becoming whatever they needed him to be. Ms. Morrison, thank you for coming on such short notice, he said, shaking her hand with both of his, a technique he'd once told me conveyed sincerity. Emma's been asking to review everything, to make sure it's all in order. You know how it is. Janet, to her credit, played her role flawlessly. Of course, it's quite common for patients to want that reassurance in their final weeks. I've brought copies of the existing will and trust documents for her review. Would you like me to be there? Michael asked, and I could hear the calculation in his voice. He wanted to be there, wanted to monitor what was being discussed, but knew it would look suspicious to push too hard. That's entirely up to Emma, Janet replied smoothly. Though in my experience, clients often prefer privacy for these discussions. It can be emotionally difficult. Of course. Michael's footsteps retreated toward his study. I'll be working if you need anything. And Sarah, Nurse Richardson, will be here at 4 for Emma's evening medications. The mention of Sarah's name made my jaw clench, so hard I tasted blood. Moments later, Janet entered my room, closing the door firmly behind her. Up close, she looked older than I remembered, her dark hair now streaked with distinguished gray, sharp lines around her mouth and eyes. But those eyes were as keen as ever, missing nothing as they swept over my deteriorated condition. Jesus, Emma, she breathed, setting her briefcase on the chair beside my bed. I knew it was bad, but I don't have time for sympathy. I cut her off, my voice stronger than it had been in days. The rage was doing what the morphine couldn't, giving me energy, purpose. I have maybe 2 weeks, Janet. 2 weeks to make sure Michael Thornton doesn't see a single cent of my money. She pulled out a leather portfolio, all business now. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, about my husband and my nurse planning their future on the grave they were digging for me. I told her about the life insurance policies Michael had pushed me to increase, the accounts he'd slowly gotten joint access to over the years. I told her about the beach house in Montauk that my father had left me, the investment properties, the trust fund Michael thought would pass directly to him as my spouse. Janet's pen flew across her legal pad, her expression growing more granite-hard with each revelation. When I finished, she looked up at me with something like admiration mixed with fury. "The bastard," she said flatly. "The calculating, greedy bastard. Can we stop him?" I asked. "Can we take it all away?" Janet's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Emma, you have no idea how much power you have right now. You're dying, yes, but you're mentally competent. That means you can revise your entire estate plan, and Connecticut is not a community property state. Michael has no legal right to anything you owned before the marriage or inherited during it." Hope, actual hope, fluttered in my chest for the first time in months. "What about the life insurance? You're the policy owner. You can change the beneficiary with a single form. Hell, you can cancel the policies entirely if you want." She flipped through her portfolio, pulling out documents. "But I have a better idea. One that will make sure Michael understands exactly how badly he miscalculated." "Tell me," I said. Janet leaned forward, her voice low and intense. "We're going to create a new will, effective immediately, that supersedes everything. The house, the investment properties, the beach house, all of it goes into a charitable trust upon your death. The Michael Thornton Cancer Research Foundation." I blinked, confused. "But that would give him—" "Not a cent," Janet interrupted, her smile widening. "The foundation will be administered by a board of trustees that I'll help you select. Michael can be listed as the figurehead. God, imagine the public relations disaster if he tried to fight it. But he'll have zero control and zero access to the funds. Every dollar will go to actual cancer research. And we'll make sure the press knows about your generous legacy." The beauty of it struck me like lightning. Michael would be trapped, unable to contest the will without looking like a monster, forced to watch as the fortune he'd been counting on slipped through his fingers to help others. The life insurance policies could be redirected the same way. "What about Sarah?" I asked. "The nurse." Janet's expression turned predatory. "Leave her to me. Having an affair with a patient's spouse while serving as their caregiver is a massive violation of medical ethics. I have contacts on the state nursing board. She'll be lucky if she can get a job at a veterinary clinic when I'm done. How quickly can we do this?" The exhaustion was creeping back, my brief surge of energy fading. "I can have the documents ready by tomorrow afternoon," Janet said, already gathering her things. "We'll need 2 witnesses who aren't beneficiaries. I'll bring my paralegal and an associate. We'll tell Michael it's standard procedure for terminal estate reviews. He won't question it." She paused at the door, looking back at me with something that might have been compassion. "Emma, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain? There's no going back once we file these documents. I thought about 15 years of marriage, about the promises made and broken, about Michael's voice in the hallway, discussing my death like a business opportunity, about every moment of pain and fear I'd faced alone while he planned his future with someone else. I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I said. Janet nodded. "Then let's make sure your last act on this earth is one hell of a final curtain." After she left, I lay back in my bed, my body screaming with pain but my mind buzzing with the same clarity I'd felt making my first $1 million investment, the sense that I was about to execute something perfect and devastating. Through the door, I could hear Michael moving around downstairs, oblivious to the fact that his carefully constructed plan had just been blown to pieces. The only question now was how long I could keep the secret before my body gave out entirely. Nurse Sarah Richardson arrived at 4:15 p.m., 15 minutes late, carrying her medical bag and the kind of effortless beauty that comes from never having known real suffering. 28 years old, blonde hair pulled into a perky ponytail, skin that glowed with health and youth, everything I used to be, once upon a lifetime ago. "Hey, Emma," she chirped, sweeping into my room with practiced cheerfulness. "Sorry, I'm running behind." Traffic on the Merritt was absolutely insane. I watched her from my bed, wondering how I'd ever miss the signs. The way her eyes would linger on Michael when he brought her coffee. The subtle shifts in her body language when he entered a room. The expensive watch on her wrist that was definitely beyond a home care nurse's typical budget. "It's fine," I managed, my voice weak and papery. Let her think the morphine had me completely under control. Let her think I was already halfway to the grave. She busied herself with checking my vitals, blood pressure, temperature, oxygen saturation. Her hands were gentle, professional. I suppose that made the betrayal worse somehow. She was good at her job, attentive and careful. She just happened to be sleeping with my husband while I died. Your blood pressure's a bit low, she noted, frowning at the digital readout. Have you been drinking enough water? Hard to, I whispered. Everything makes me nauseous. Sarah's face arranged itself into sympathy, and I marveled at how convincing she was. If I hadn't heard her in the hallway with Michael, I might never have suspected. I know it's difficult, but hydration is so important. Even just iced chips can help. Michael appeared in the doorway, and I watched them carefully. They were smart, no obvious glances, no lingering touches. But there was an awareness between them, a magnetic pull that spoke of intimacy. It was in the way Sarah angled her body slightly toward him, the way Michael's voice softened by half an octave when he addressed her. "How is she?" he asked, playing the concerned husband with Academy Award precision. "Stable," Sarah replied, "though her blood pressure is lower than I'd like. We might want to discuss it with Dr. Patterson." They talked about me like I was already gone, their voices floating over my bed as if I were a medical curiosity rather than a person. I let my eyes drift closed, let them think the morphine had pulled me under, and listened to their careful, coded conversation. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Michael asked. "I hate leaving her alone for too long." "I can move some things around," Sarah said. "Come by in the morning instead of evening." "That would be perfect." A pause, loaded with meaning. "I really don't know what I'd do without you through all this." "You don't have to thank me, Michael. I'm just doing my job." But the way she said his name, intimate, familiar, possessive, said everything about what her job actually entailed. After she left, Michael lingered in my room, standing at the window and looking out at the snow-covered grounds of our estate. From behind my barely open eyelids, I studied him. Was he thinking about his future with Sarah, calculating how much longer he had to maintain the charade? Or was there some small part of him that actually felt guilt for what he was doing? "I'm sorry, Em," he said suddenly, his voice so soft I almost missed it. "I know you probably can't hear me, but I'm sorry it came to this. You deserved better. You deserved." He broke off, and for a moment I wondered if he was actually going to confess. If somewhere beneath the greed and betrayal, the man I'd married still existed. "You deserved a different ending," he finished finally. Then he left, closing the door with a soft click. I opened my eyes in the darkness, staring at the ceiling and feeling the tears leak from the corners of my eyes into my hair. The cruelest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was those brief moments when I glimpsed the man I'd loved, the flashes of genuine humanity that made me question everything I'd heard. But then I remembered his voice in the hallway. "Once she's gone, everything is ours." No amount of late-night apologies could erase that. The next morning, Janet returned with her paralegal and an associate, both of whom I'd never met before. Perfect witnesses, exactly as required by Connecticut law. Michael hovered anxiously in the hallway, clearly uncomfortable with being excluded, but unable to justify his presence without raising suspicions. "It's just a formality, Mr. Thornton," Janet assured him. "Standard review of the estate documents. Nothing to worry about." Behind my closed bedroom door, I signed document after document, my hand shaking so badly that my signature looked like a dying spider's last crawl across the page. But it was legible enough, witnessed and notarized, completely legal and binding. The Michael Thornton Cancer Research Foundation. I read aloud from the trust documents, my voice barely a whisper. "God, Janet, you really know how to twist the knife." "I learned from the best," she said, meaning my father. "Your dad once told me that the best revenge is the kind that looks like generosity from the outside. Make your enemies into saints, and they can never escape the halo." The documents were extensive, thorough, and absolutely bulletproof. Every asset I owned, and I owned considerably more than Michael knew about, thanks to the inheritance from my father and some savvy pre-marriage investments, would go into the foundation. The house, the cars, the beach property, the investment portfolio that had grown to nearly $8 million. Michael would get the life insurance payout, $3 million, a fortune by most standards. But the timing stipulation Janet had built in was diabolical. He could only access it if he remained unmarried for 2 years following my death, ostensibly to allow proper time for grieving and to honor the sanctity of our marriage. If he married Sarah, or anyone, within that window, every cent would revert to the foundation. He'll be trapped, I said, understanding the full genius of it. He can't marry her without losing everything, but he also can't access most of the fortune he was counting on. And when the media covers your generous legacy, Janet added, when they write about the dying wife who turned her tragedy into a foundation to help others, he'll be unable to contest it without looking like the villain he actually is. I signed the final document, and with that shaking signature, I sealed Michael's fate. One more thing, I said, looking up at Janet. I want you to deliver a letter to him. After I'm gone. Can you do that? Of course, she said, pulling out her phone to take notes. What do you want it to say? I closed my eyes, and the words came easily, the message I'd been composing in my head since that night I'd heard him in the hallway. Michael, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, and you'll have discovered that your careful plans didn't quite work out the way you expected. I heard you that night with Sarah. I heard every word, every calculation, every cold dismissal of our 15 years together. You were waiting for me to die so you could start your real life, the one you'd built in secret while I suffered. I hope the wait was worth it. I hope you enjoy the foundation that bears your name, the one you'll have to smile about for cameras while knowing you'll never see a cent. I hope Sarah was worth losing everything. You taught me that love can be a lie, but you also taught me something more valuable, that sometimes the dying have more power than the living. Thank you for that lesson. I'll carry it with me wherever I go next. Emma, Janet typed in silence, her jaw tight. When she finished, she looked up at me with fierce approval. Emma Thornton, you magnificent, ruthless woman. I learned from the best. I echoed her earlier words, smiling despite the pain radiating through my body. My father always said that if you're going to burn a bridge, make sure everyone can see the flames. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months, knowing that every legal document was filed, every trap was set, every detail of my revenge was locked into place. All I had to do now was survive long enough to make sure Michael never suspected what was coming. The morphine dreams were getting worse. For days after signing the new documents, I found myself caught between waking and sleeping, unable to tell which side of consciousness I was on. In the dreams, Michael would sit beside my bed holding my hand, his face young and tender, whispering promises about growing old together. Then the dream would shift, and he'd be with Sarah, the two of them laughing over my corpse, dividing up my jewelry like pirates splitting treasure. I'd wake gasping, my heart racing, to find the room empty and dark. Dr. Patterson had increased my morphine again. The pain was becoming unmanageable, he explained, and comfort was now the only goal. I knew what that meant in medical terminology. The end was approaching faster than anyone had predicted. Days, Emma, he told me gently during his visit. Maybe a week. I'm so sorry. Your body is it's giving up. Michael stood behind him, his face a mask of devastation that might have been genuine, or might have been the performance of a lifetime. I couldn't tell anymore. The morphine blurred everything, including my certainty about what I'd heard that night. Had he really said those things? Or had I dreamed them, my cancer-riddled mind conjuring betrayal from thin air? But then Sarah would arrive for her shifts, and I'd catch that look between them, that electric awareness, and I'd know. I'd know it had been real. You're going to need round-the-clock care now, Dr. Patterson said, already writing orders. I'm recommending hospice. They can keep you comfortable. No, I managed, my voice barely audible. Home. I want to stay home. Michael squeezed my hand, and I felt the tremor in his fingers. Of course, darling. Whatever you want. We'll bring in more nursing staff. Sarah can coordinate it all. Of course she could. Of course she'd be here, at the center of it all, counting down my final hours with her lover. That night, alone in the darkness, I forced myself to stay conscious through the morphine fog. I needed to hold on just a little longer. The documents were filed, yes, but Janet had warned me. If I died before the 30-day contesting period elapsed, Michael might find a way to challenge the will, claiming I wasn't mentally competent or was under undue influence. You need to survive 3 more weeks, she told me quietly during her last visit. 21 days from signing. Can you do that? I promised I would. But that was before the pain became a living thing, a creature with teeth that gnawed at my insides without pause. That was before the morphine turned my days into a soup of half memories and fever dreams. 21 days seemed like an eternity. On day 7, I developed pneumonia. My lungs, already compromised by the cancer, couldn't fight the infection. Dr. Patterson told Michael that this was likely it, the final complication that would take me. Days, he repeated. 48 hours, maybe 72 at most. I listened from my bed, my breathing rattling in my chest like dried leaves, and felt panic claw through the morphine. 14 more days. I needed 14 more days. That night, I did something I hadn't done since childhood. I prayed. Not to the God my mother had believed in, but to my father's memory, to the fierce spirit that had built an empire from nothing and taught me to never, ever give up. Not yet, I begged him. Just 2 more weeks. Let me see this through. Let me win this one last battle. The next morning, impossibly, my fever broke. Dr. Patterson was baffled. The x-rays showed the pneumonia should have killed me, but somehow my body was fighting. Not winning, but fighting, buying time with sheer stubborn refusal to die on schedule. It's remarkable, he told Michael, shaking his head. I've seen this sometimes with terminal patients. They seem to hold on for something specific. A birthday, an anniversary, a visitor they're waiting for. Michael nodded, his face carefully composed. But I saw something else in his eyes, something that might have been frustration or fear. I was deviating from the script. I was supposed to be gone by now, leaving him free to start his new life. Instead, I was lingering, this inconvenient corpse that refused to completely die. Sarah began spending more time at the house, ostensibly to provide the round-the-clock care I needed. I'd hear her and Michael talking in low voices when they thought I was unconscious, their conversation a mix of medical updates and careful planning for after. The memorial service should be small, Michael said during one of these conversations. Emma always hated crowds. Immediate family only. That's thoughtful, Sarah murmured. She'd appreciate that. Would I? I wanted to laugh. The Emma they thought they knew would have appreciated a lot of things, like a faithful husband, or a caregiver with ethics. But that Emma had died months ago. What was left was something harder, colder, sharpened by betrayal into a weapon with only one purpose left. Survive. 14 more days became 13, then 12. Each morning I'd wake up, still alive, and feel a grim satisfaction. Each breath was an act of defiance. Each heartbeat a middle finger to Michael's carefully laid plans. On day 11, Janet visited again, ostensibly to review final arrangements, but actually to check my mental state. She needed to confirm that I was still competent, still aware, still the same person who'd signed those documents. "How are you holding up?" she asked quietly, closing the door behind her. "Spite," I rasped, my voice destroyed by the pneumonia. "I'm running on pure spite." She smiled, fierce and proud. "Good. That's good. 10 more days, Emma. Can you make it? Do I have a choice?" "No," she said honestly. But I needed to ask anyway. After she left, I stared at the ceiling and counted. 10 days, 240 hours, 14,400 minutes. Each one a small victory. Each one bringing me closer to the moment when Michael would open that letter and realize exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. The morphine pulled at me, promising peace, promising an end to the pain. It would be so easy to let go, to stop fighting, to slip away into whatever came next. But not yet, not until I'd won. On day 16, 5 days before the safe zone, something unexpected happened. I woke from a morphine haze to find someone sitting beside my bed, and for a moment, I thought I'd finally crossed over into full hallucinations. Because the woman watching me with fierce, dark eyes was my sister Patricia, who was supposed to be in Barcelona until next week. "Pat!" I croaked, my destroyed voice making her name barely recognizable. "Jesus Christ, Emma." Her voice cracked, and she grabbed my skeletal hand with both of hers. "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was?" I had to hear it from Janet Morrison, of all people. Janet. Of course. Janet must have called her, must have told her everything. "You were in Europe," I managed. "Didn't want to ruin your trip." "Ruin my—" Patricia broke off, anger and grief warring on her face. My sister, 3 years younger, infinitely more fierce, the one person in the world who'd always had my back. Emma, you're dying. She stopped, blinking hard. I should have been here. I should have known something was wrong. Michael didn't call you? I already knew the answer. Michael told me you were stable, that things were under control, that there was no need to rush back. Patricia's jaw clenched. I'm going to kill him. Get in line, I whispered, then managed a rattling laugh that turned into a coughing fit. Patricia held a cup of water to my lips, her hands shaking. When the coughing subsided, she leaned close, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Janet told me everything. The conversation you overheard. The new will. The foundation. Emma, this is crazy, I offered. Brilliant, she corrected. Absolutely fucking brilliant. Dad would be so proud. The mention of our father brought tears to my eyes. He died 5 years ago, a massive heart attack while playing golf, gone before the ambulance even arrived. Quick, painless, the kind of death I would have preferred to this slow dissolution. But he'd also taught me that sometimes the long game was the only one worth playing. I need 5 more days, I told Patricia. 5 more days, and the will is bulletproof. He can't contest it, can't break it, can't touch a single cent. Then you'll get 5 more days, she said fiercely. Whatever it takes. I'm not leaving this house until... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the words. Until I'm dead, I finished for her. You can say it, Pat. It's fine. I've made my peace with it. But had I? Lying there, looking at my sister's face, so vital, so alive, everything I used to be, I felt the full weight of what I was losing. Not just my life, but every moment I wouldn't get to experience. Every sunrise I wouldn't see. Every laugh I wouldn't share. Every grandchild I'd never meet from children I'd never had. Michael had stolen my future, yes. But the cancer was stealing my present, and no amount of revenge could give that back. Don't, Patricia said sharply, reading my face with the accuracy of someone who'd known me for 40 years. Don't you dare feel sorry for yourself right now. You're winning, Emma. You're beating him at his own game. 5 more days, and you'll have pulled off the most spectacular middle finger in the history of estate law. Despite everything, I smiled. Language, Pat. What would Mother say? Mother would say that a man who plots his wife's death for money deserves everything coming to him. She squeezed my hand. Now, where is the cheating bastard? I want to look him in the eye and see if I can watch him without screaming. Steady, I managed. Working. Patricia stood, her spine straight, her face settling into the polite mask she used for people she despised. I'll go say hello. Play the grieving sister. Let him think I don't know anything. Careful, I warned. He's good at reading people. So am I, she said grimly. And unlike him, I actually give a damn about you. After she left, I lay in the gathering darkness and listened to the murmur of voices from downstairs. Patricia's light laughter, Michael's carefully calibrated sympathy. They were performing for each other, 2 actors on a stage, neither knowing the full script. But I knew. I knew every line, every plot twist, every devastating finale. 5 more days. I could do this. I could survive 5 more days. That night, Sarah arrived for the evening shift, and I watched through half-closed eyes as Michael intercepted her in the hallway. Their voices were low, urgent, and even through the morphine fog I caught fragments. Sister showed up unexpectedly. Be careful, she's watching everything. Just need a few more days. A few more days. We were all playing the same waiting game, counting down to the same inevitable moment, each of us certain we knew how the story would end. But only I knew the truth hidden in those legal documents Janet had filed. Only I knew about the foundation, the restrictions, the poison pills embedded in every clause. Michael thought he was waiting for freedom. He was actually waiting for a cage. Day 18 arrived with a snowstorm that turned the world outside my window into a white void. I watched the flakes fall through the bare trees and felt a kinship with them, both of us drifting, inevitable, moving toward an ending we couldn't control. Patricia had taken up residence in the guest room, playing the devoted sister with Academy Award precision. She'd sit with me for hours, reading aloud from books I could barely follow, talking about memories I could barely remember. But beneath the performance, I could see her rage simmering, contained by sheer force of will. I don't know how you stand it, she whispered during one of her visits, making sure the door was closed. Watching him pretend to care. Watching her touch you with those hands that have been all over your husband. Because I'm winning, I said, the words taking enormous effort. My body was failing faster now, shutting down system by system. Soon there would be nothing left but the spite keeping me alive. 3 more days, Pat. Just 3 more days. But that afternoon, something shifted. Michael appeared in my doorway with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear mixed with something that might have been desperation. Emma, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk. It's important. Through the morphine haze, alarm bells rang. Had he found out somehow? Had someone leaked information about the new will? What? I managed. He came and sat beside my bed, and for the first time in months, he actually looked at me, really looked at me, not through me or past me, but directly into my eyes. I got a call from Janet Morrison's office. They said there was some question about the estate documents, that they needed to review something with me. My heart, already weak, stuttered. No, not yet. 3 more days. They wouldn't give me details, Michael continued, watching my face carefully. Said it was just a procedural thing. But Emma, I need to know, did you change the will? Did you make revisions without telling me? This was it. The moment where I could either maintain the charade or burn it all down early. The morphine made my thoughts slow, syrupy, hard to organize. What was the right move? What would keep me safe for 3 more days? Why? I whispered. Why do you care? Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or guilt. Why do I? Emma, I'm your husband. Of course I care about the estate planning. I need to know what provisions are in place. What? What you're getting. I finished for him, and even through the morphine, I felt the surge of cold clarity. That's what you really want to know, isn't it, Michael? How much? How soon? He stood abruptly, and for a second, I saw the mask slip completely. Saw the calculation, the fear, the desperate need to know if his plan was still intact. I don't know what you're implying. Don't you? The words were taking everything I had, but I couldn't stop now. This moment had been building for weeks, and the morphine had stripped away my ability to play pretend. Did you really think I wouldn't hear you that night? You and Sarah, planning your future in my hallway while I died in my bed. The color drained from Michael's face. For a long moment, he just stood there, frozen, the truth hanging between us like a blade. Once she's gone, everything is ours. I quoted back at him, my voice a rasping whisper. That's what you said. You couldn't even wait until I was actually dead before dividing up the spoils. He sat down heavily, and I watched the calculations running behind his eyes. Deny it. Confess. Beg forgiveness. What was the play that would salvage his plan? How long have you known? He finally asked, his voice flat. Long enough, I said. Long enough to make sure you'll never see a cent of what you're counting on. The fear in his eyes crystallized into something sharper. What did you do? 3 more days, I whispered. You'll find out in 3 more days. Emma, please. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away with what little strength I had left. Get out, I said. Get out and take your nurse with you. I don't want either of you touching me again. Emma, you don't understand. It wasn't like that. Get out. The scream tore something inside me, sent pain radiating through my chest that had nothing to do with cancer and everything to do with rage. Michael stumbled backward, his face stricken, and then Patricia was there, summoned by my cry. What the hell did you do? She demanded, stepping between me and Michael like a shield. Nothing, He knows, I gasped, the pain-making black spots dance in my vision. He knows I changed the will. Patricia's face went stone-hard. She turned to Michael with such contempt that he actually flinched. You have about 5 seconds to get out of this room before I call the police and tell them my sister is being harassed on her deathbed by her gold-digging husband. This is my house. Actually, Patricia said coldly, according to the deed, it's Emma's house, left to her by our father. You've just been living in it. Now get the hell out. Michael looked between us, seeming to understand that the facade had completely shattered. Whatever he'd been planning to say, whatever explanation or justification he'd been preparing, died on his lips. This isn't over, he said finally. Oh, sweetie, Patricia replied with a razor-blade smile. It's been over for weeks. You just didn't know it yet. After he left, Patricia closed the door and locked it, the first time in months the door had been locked. She came and sat beside me, taking my hand as I gasped through the pain. Did I ruin it? I asked. Did I ruin everything by telling him too soon? No, Patricia said firmly. The documents are filed. The 30-day period ends in 3 days. He can't contest it. And even if he could, you just gave us witnesses to his state of mind. He was asking about the money, about the estate. Any lawyer would have a field day with that. Janet! I'll call her right now. She'll know what to do. Patricia pulled out her phone, already dialing. And Emma, what you did just now, telling him you knew. That took more courage than anything. You faced him down. You didn't let him gaslight you or manipulate you. Dad would be so damn proud. I wanted to feel victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. So tired that even breathing seemed like too much effort. The confrontation had taken everything I had left, burned through reserves I didn't have to spare. Pat, I whispered. I don't think I have 3 days left. Yes, you do, she said fiercely, gripping my hand like she could physically anchor me to life. You have 3 days, because I won't accept anything less. Do you hear me, Emma? 3 more days. You've come this far. Don't you dare quit now. Through the locked door, I could hear Michael's voice, raised in anger, and then Sarah's softer tones trying to calm him. They were panicking now, their perfect plan disintegrating, and the irony wasn't lost on me. All this time, they'd been waiting for me to die. Now they were desperate for me, to stay alive long enough for them to figure out what I'd done. But I'd already won. The documents were filed, the traps were set, the revenge was complete. All I had to do was survive 3 more days. Just 3 more days. By day 19, I could no longer speak. The effort of yesterday's confrontation had burned through whatever reserves my body had left. Dr. Patterson came in the morning, examined me with gentle hands and sad eyes, and told Patricia that it was time to say goodbye, time to accept that I was actively dying now. Hours, he said quietly in the hallway, probably thinking I couldn't hear. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But not long. 2 days. I needed 2 more days. Patricia brought in her laptop and set it up on the dresser where I could see the screen. She pulled up photos. Our childhood, our parents, holidays and birthdays, and ordinary moments that had somehow become precious. I watched the images flicker past and felt my life condensing down to these fragments of light and memory. Remember this? Patricia said, pointing to a photo of us on the beach, both of us young and tan and laughing at something the camera didn't catch. Dad had just told us about the trust fund. You said you were going to use your money to buy the biggest house in Connecticut and fill it with children. I couldn't respond, but tears leaked from my eyes. The children had never come. 2 miscarriages, then the doctors telling us it would be dangerous to try again. Michael had been supportive, or so I'd thought. Now I wondered if he'd been relieved. Children would have complicated his eventual plans. Don't, Patricia said, reading my expression. Don't waste your last hours thinking about him. Think about the good stuff. Think about Dad teaching you to negotiate. Mom teaching you to play piano. That summer we spent in France. Remember Paris? I did remember. I remembered being 23 and fearless, standing on the Pont des Arts with the Seine flowing beneath us, absolutely certain that my life would be extraordinary. I'd been right, just not in the way I'd imagined. Michael tried to enter twice that day, and both times Patricia blocked him. She doesn't want to see you, she said coldly. I'm still her husband. You're a vulture circling a corpse, Patricia snapped. Now get out before I make a scene that'll be very difficult to explain to the hospice workers. Sarah had stopped coming entirely. Whether she'd been fired or had simply abandoned her post when things got complicated, I didn't know. A different nurse, older, grandmotherly, no connection to Michael, had taken over my care. She was gentle and efficient, adjusting my morphine drip without trying to make small talk, understanding that sometimes silence was its own kind of comfort. That night, as the sun set and painted the snow outside my window in shades of pink and gold, Patricia leaned close to my ear. One more day, Emma. Just one more day. Can you make it? I couldn't answer, couldn't even move my eyes to look at her. But somewhere deep in the part of me that was still fighting, still refusing to surrender, I held on. One more day. Just one more day. The morphine dreams that night were strange, disjointed. I was at my wedding, wearing my mother's dress, walking down the aisle toward Michael. But when I reached the altar and he lifted my veil, the face looking back at me was a stranger's. Someone I'd never known, never loved, never trusted with my heart. You should have looked closer, Dream Michael said. You should have seen what I really was. I woke gasping, if you could call it waking. The line between conscious and unconscious had blurred into meaninglessness. Patricia was asleep in the chair beside my bed, her hand still holding mine, her face exhausted and tear-stained. Beyond the door, I heard voices. Michael and someone else, a man I didn't recognize. Can't access the documents until after she dies, the stranger was saying. Client confidentiality. But Mr. Thornton, I have to ask, did your wife give you any indication that she was planning major revisions to her estate plan? A lawyer. Michael had brought a lawyer to the house while I was dying. She was on heavy painkillers, Michael said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. She wasn't thinking clearly. If she made changes in that state, they can't be valid, can they? That depends on several factors. I need to know what I'm walking into here. That house alone is worth $3 million. The investment properties, the beach house, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. There it was, the truth stripped of all pretense. He wasn't grieving a wife, he was inventorying an estate. Mr. Thornton, I understand your concern, but until the will goes through probate takes months. I need to know now. The anger in his voice sent a spike of fear through me. But then Patricia stirred, opened her eyes, and squeezed my hand. He's panicking, she whispered, having heard the same conversation. He knows something's wrong but can't figure out what. God, Emma, you really did a number on him. One more day. I just needed one more day. But my body had other plans. As the night deepened, my breathing became more labored, more irregular. The nurse came in multiple times, checking my vitals with increasing concern. Around midnight, she called Dr. Patterson. She's transitioning, I heard her say quietly. It could be hours. I think the family should be notified. Patricia called our aunt, our cousins, the handful of people who actually cared about me rather than my money. They began arriving in the early morning hours, filling the house with quiet grief and memories. Michael stood in the corner of my room, surrounded by my blood relatives but completely isolated. No one spoke to him. No one acknowledged him. They'd all heard by now, through Patricia, about what I'd overheard, about his plans with Sarah. He was already a ghost in his own house. As the sun rose on day 20, my breathing became more irregular. Minutes between breaths, then longer. The nurse adjusted my morphine up, ensuring I felt no pain, no fear, only a gentle sliding away. Patricia held my hand, her tears falling on my skin. One more day, Emma. Please. Just a few more hours. But time had become strange, elastic. Was it hours? Minutes? Days? I couldn't tell anymore. I heard Michael's voice from very far away. Is this it? Is she? She's dying, Dr. Patterson said quietly. It won't be long now. The room filled with the sound of crying, of whispered prayers, of people saying goodbye to someone I used to be. But somewhere in the darkness that was pulling me under, I held on. Not yet. Not yet. Just a few more hours. I didn't die on day 20. I woke up, if you could call it waking, to find pale sunlight streaming through my window and Patricia's stunned face hovering over mine. Emma, she whispered. Emma, can you hear me? I tried to respond but couldn't. My body was too far gone now, too much a corpse already to manage speech. But my eyes must have moved, must have focused on her, because she let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. You made it, she said. You stubborn, magnificent woman. You made it to day 21. 30 days. The documents were now uncontestable. Bulletproof. Whatever Michael tried to do, whatever lawyers he brought in, whatever arguments he made about my mental state or undue influence, none of it would matter. I'd won. Through the haze, I heard commotion downstairs. Raised voices. Michael's, sharp with panic, and another voice, Janet Morrison's, crisp and professional and utterly devastating. I'm here to review the estate documents with you, Mr. Thornton, as a standard procedure following the 30-day filing period. I don't understand, Michael was saying. Why wasn't I informed about changes to the will? You weren't a beneficiary of the previous will's substantive assets, Mr. Thornton, which were all inherited or premarital property. As such, spousal notification wasn't required under Connecticut law. Your wife was well within her rights to restructure her estate as she saw fit. The silence that followed was enormous. I imagined Michael's face, the understanding slowly dawning, the careful structure of his plans crumbling into dust. What did she do? Perhaps we should discuss this in private, Janet said. This is a matter of some complexity. Their footsteps moved toward Michael's study, and the door closed. I would never know exactly how that conversation went, would never see the moment when Michael understood the full extent of what I'd done. But I could imagine it, Janet's precise legal language stripping away each piece of his expected fortune, revealing the foundation, the restrictions on the life insurance, the 2-year marriage prohibition. The cage I'd built for him out of his own greed. Patricia sat beside me, holding my hand and listening to the muffled sounds from downstairs. At one point, something crashed, glass breaking, maybe a lamp thrown against a wall. Then silence. Then the sound of a man crying, harsh and ugly and completely devoid of dignity. He knows, Patricia said quietly. He finally knows. The afternoon sun was slanting through the window when Janet came upstairs. She looked tired but grimly satisfied, like a general who just won a particularly difficult battle. It's done, she told Patricia. He knows everything. The foundation, the restrictions, all of it. She moved closer to my bed, looking down at me with something like admiration. Emma, I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone execute a final strategy with such precision. Your father would be proud. I wanted to thank her, to tell her how much her help had meant, but my body wouldn't cooperate anymore. I could only lie there, feeling myself slip away by degrees, while Janet and Patricia talked in low voices about probate procedures and foundation administration. What about Michael? Patricia asked. What's he going to do? What can he do? Janet replied. He can contest the will, but he won't win. Emma was clearly mentally competent when she signed the documents, and we have multiple witnesses. He can try to claim undue influence, but that's laughable given that he was in the house the entire time and had ample opportunity to be present for the signing. His only real option is to accept the $3 million from life insurance and move on. And if he marries Sarah, then he forfeits even that. Janet's smile was sharp. Emma built the perfect trap. If he marries for love, he loses the money. If he stays single for the money, he loses love. Either way, he loses. As the sun set on day 21, I felt the final threads holding me to life beginning to fray. Patricia seemed to sense it too. She dismissed Janet, called in our family, and they gathered around my bed like a protective circle. Michael tried to enter once more. Patricia blocked him at the door. You don't get this, she said coldly. You don't get to be here for her final moments. You lost that right when you planned her death like a business transaction. Patricia, please, I loved her. I know you don't believe me, but I did love her once. Once, Patricia repeated, but not enough. Not when it mattered. Now get out. Go find your nurse and plan your future. Just know that Emma's ghost will be haunting every dollar you don't have. The door closed, and we were alone, Patricia, our aunt, our cousins, the people who actually loved me. They told stories, shared memories, laughed and cried and celebrated a life that was ending but refused to be forgotten. As the darkness pulled me under for what I knew was the final time, my last thought was one of savage satisfaction. I'd won. Despite the cancer, despite the betrayal, despite everything Michael and fate had thrown at me, I'd won. The game was over, and I'd had the last move. Emma Thornton died at 11:47 p.m. on the night of day 21, surrounded by family who loved her and mourned her passing as the loss it genuinely was. Michael was in his study when the nurse came to tell him, and according to Patricia, who took grim satisfaction in watching, his face cycled through a dozen emotions: relief, grief, guilt, fear, and finally, a cold calculation as he realized he was now free to move forward. What he didn't know was that Janet Morrison had one final delivery to make. The funeral was held 3 days later, a small affair at Emma's request. Michael played the grieving widower perfectly, his voice breaking as he delivered a eulogy full of memories and love and promises that he'd honor her legacy. "Emma was the best thing that ever happened to me," he said, tears on his cheeks that might have been genuine or might have been the performance of a lifetime. "She taught me about love, about strength, about grace in the face of unimaginable hardship. I will miss her every day for the rest of my life." Patricia sat in the front row and imagined all the ways she could expose him. But that wasn't part of Emma's plan. Emma had wanted something more elegant, more devastating. After the service, after the guests had left and the house had emptied, Janet Morrison arrived with a manila envelope. "Mr. Thornton," she said, "your wife left instructions that you were to receive this after the funeral. I'm required by law to deliver it personally." Michael took the envelope with shaking hands. "What is it?" "A letter," Janet said simply. "I haven't read it, but I was asked to be present when you opened it as a witness." Patricia materialized from the hallway, her presence ensuring Michael couldn't simply destroy the letter unread. He looked between them, then at the envelope, and Patricia saw the moment he understood. This was Emma's final play. With fingers that weren't quite steady, he opened the envelope and began to read. "Michael, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, and you'll have discovered that your careful plans didn't quite work out the way you expected. I heard you that night with Sarah. I heard every word, every calculation, every cold dismissal of our 15 years together. Once she's gone, everything is ours. Did you know I was awake? Did you care? Or was I already so dead to you that it didn't matter? You were waiting for me to die so you could start your real life, the one you'd built in secret while I suffered. You couldn't even wait until I was actually gone before dividing up my father's legacy like pirates splitting treasure. So I made sure that your wait would be worth it. I made sure you'd get exactly what you deserved. The foundation that bears your name, you'll have to smile about it for cameras, attend galas, give speeches about cancer research. You'll be the face of a charity that will help thousands of people, and you won't see a single cent of it. Every time someone thanks you for your generosity, you'll remember that it was my money, my choice, my final middle finger to your greed. The life insurance you were counting on, you can have it if you stay unmarried for 2 years. That was my favorite touch, I'll admit. You can have Sarah, or you can have the money, but you can't have both. Choose wisely. I wonder which one you'll pick. You taught me that love can be a lie, but you also taught me something more valuable, that sometimes the dying have more power than the living. Thank you for that lesson. I'll carry it with me, wherever I go next. I hope the wait was worth it, Michael. I hope every time you look at the house you can't afford to keep, or the cars you have to sell, or the lifestyle you can't maintain, you remember the woman you were willing to let die for money that was never going to be yours. I hope Sarah was worth losing everything. Goodbye, Michael. I'd say I'll miss you, but we both know that would be a lie. And I'm done lying. Emma. The letter slipped from Michael's fingers and fluttered to the floor. His face had gone completely white, his hands shaking with what might have been rage or grief, or the dawning understanding of complete devastation. She knew, he whispered. The whole time? Yes, Patricia said, stepping forward with savage satisfaction. She knew, and she used every minute of her last weeks to ensure you'd never profit from her death. The house. Can't afford the property taxes without her money. The cars. Same problem. This lifestyle you've been living. It was all Emma. And now it's all gone. Michael looked up at her, and for the first time, Patricia saw something like genuine anguish in his eyes. But she felt no sympathy. Emma had suffered for months, while he planned his future. Whatever pain he felt now was justice, not tragedy. I did love her, he said, his voice breaking. I know you don't believe me, but at the beginning. But not at the end, Patricia finished coldly. Not when she needed you most. Not when it mattered. She picked up the letter from the floor, carefully folding it back into its envelope. I'm keeping this, by the way, along with recordings of the conversations Emma documented, copies of all the financial records, everything. If you try to contest the will, if you try to make trouble for the foundation, if you try to paint Emma as mentally incompetent or claim she was manipulated, all of it becomes public. The affair, your planning, every ugly detail. You're blackmailing me, Michael said flatly. I'm protecting my sister's legacy, Patricia corrected. Emma wanted the truth to stay private because she didn't want to become a tabloid story. But if you force the issue, I have no problem making you the villain you actually are. Janet Morrison, who'd been standing silently by the door, finally spoke. Mr. Thornton, I'd advise you to accept the life insurance settlement and move on. You're young, healthy, and capable of rebuilding. It won't be the lifestyle you expected, but it's more than many people have. And Sarah? He asked, looking between them. What happened to Sarah? Nurse Richardson is no longer licensed in Connecticut, Janet said with professional coldness. The state nursing board found that engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a patient's spouse while serving as their caregiver constituted a severe ethical violation. She's currently facing disciplinary proceedings in 3 other states as well. The pieces clicked into place in Michael's mind. Emma hadn't just destroyed his financial future, she destroyed Sarah's career. His plan hadn't just failed, it had imploded spectacularly, taking everything with it. I should go, Janet said, already moving toward the door. Patricia, you'll call me if there are any issues with the estate administration? I will. Thank you, Janet, for everything. After Janet left, Patricia and Michael stood in the foyer of the house, Emma's house, and looked at each other across a gulf of grief and anger and irreparable damage. What do I do now? Michael asked, and he sounded genuinely lost. I don't know, Patricia said honestly. And I don't care. You made your choices, Michael. Now you get to live with the consequences. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Emma loved you once. Really loved you. The woman who planned all this, the foundation, the restrictions, the letter, that wasn't the woman who married you. You created her when you decided that money mattered more than her life. Patricia! She's gone, Michael. And you killed her long before the cancer did. Patricia walked out into the cold January afternoon, leaving Michael alone in a house full of expensive things he couldn't afford to keep, haunted by the ghost of a woman who'd had the last word from beyond the grave. 6 months later, the Michael Thornton Cancer Research Foundation held its first annual gala, raising over $2 million for pancreatic cancer research. Michael stood on stage, looking handsome and bereaved in his custom tuxedo, and gave a speech about his late wife's courage and generosity. Emma taught me that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in the lives we touch and the legacy we leave behind, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. This foundation is her gift to the world, and I'm honored to be the steward of her vision. Patricia watched from the back of the room, a glass of champagne in hand, and smiled coldly. Michael had chosen the money over Sarah. The nurse had left Connecticut entirely, reportedly engaged to a doctor in Oregon, which meant he'd have access to the life insurance in 18 more months. But he'd also have to continue playing the devoted widower, continue managing the foundation, continue pretending to be the man Emma had believed she'd married. The cage Emma had built was working perfectly. She really got him, someone said beside her, and Patricia turned to find Janet Morrison, also watching the proceedings with satisfaction. She really did, Patricia agreed. Every time he has to smile for the cameras, every time he has to talk about cancer research, every time someone thanks him for his generosity, he'll remember what he lost. Your sister was extraordinary, Janet said. In all my years practicing law, I've never seen anyone execute a plan with such precision while literally dying. She learned from the best, Patricia said, meaning their father. He always said that if you're going to win so completely that your opponent never gets another chance to play. On stage, Michael was concluding his speech, his eyes suspiciously bright with tears that might have been genuine grief for what he'd lost. Not Emma the woman, but the fortune she'd represented. To Emma, he said, raising a glass, may her legacy live on forever. The room erupted in applause, and Patricia raised her own glass in a silent toast. To Emma, she thought, who proved that sometimes the dying have the sharpest teeth, and the longest memory, and the perfect aim for where to strike when it matters most. The foundation would do genuine good, millions would be raised, research would be funded, lives would be saved. That was Emma's real legacy, the thing she built from the ruins of her marriage and the betrayal of her trust. Michael would be remembered as a generous philanthropist. But Patricia would always know the truth, that he was a man who'd gambled everything on his wife's death and lost it all to her brilliance. Emma had died, yes, but she died on her own terms, having played the game better than Michael ever could. And in the end, That was its own kind of victory. The sweetest kind there is.